that was shaken quite a bit after the president announced a massive fuel hike in the price of petrol at the pumps, and that saw people coming onto the streets, and that was put down quite decidedly by the authorities in the country. But the country is also suffering and going through a number of other challenges, including on the economic front. Zimbabwe's current inflation rate is believed to be around 290%. To find out if this is true and what it means, I'm now joined by an economist in Zimbabwe, Eddie Cross. Thanks very much for joining us. Welcome to the program. Eddie, we were getting reports at the beginning of this week that Zimbabwe's inflation rate is now the second highest in the world, behind Venezuela, at 290%. Is there truth to that amount?
I think the figure comes from a professor in the United States, Steve Hanks, who deals with these issues, and he is in fact one of the world's renowned specialists in the field of inflation. But I think on the ground, the real inflation rate is probably closer to 50% at the present time, which still puts us in hyperinflation territory. It still is a very, very serious level of inflation, and it's been accelerating sharply in the last 2 months.
So what's been feeding this inflation?
Well, when Minister Mtuli was appointed in August 2018, he inherited from the previous regime a mountain of RTGS dollars, $22 billion. This was in different formats. Some of it was in bank balances, some of it was in the form of an overdraft at the Reserve Bank, other it was in TBs held by banks and individuals. And in addition to that, there was a 40% deficit in budget financing. So he had to correct that. And what he did two things at that particular point in time. He raised taxes, and in addition, he delinked the RTGS dollar from the US dollar. Prior to that, the RTGS dollar was trading at about 1.4 to 1. But the moment he delinked it, it went to 7 to 1. And it is that which is driving the inflation today, because what happened then is all our imports, and we import 70% of what we consume, all our imports were suddenly elevated in cost. And I think we're going to face very high levels of inflation for quite a considerable time to come, while inflation deals with the mountain of RTGS dollars.
Do you think then that the finance minister is going about it the right way, that perhaps a considerable amount of pain needs to be gotten through before things start coming right?
Oh, absolutely. I don't think there's any doubt about that. I think the reality was the situation he inherited from his predecessor was completely unsustainable. And by delinking the RTGS dollar from the US dollar, what he did was to bring home the reality to Zimbabweans that the money in their bank was not US dollars. And what he's got to do now, he's got to devalue the RTGS mountain to a level where our economy can handle it. And I think that could be 4 to 1. The dollar has in fact stabilized at about 1.38, 1.4 at the present time. And Peter, you've got to remember that at 1.4 to a US dollar, the RTGS dollar is stronger than the rand. So it's not that this is a weak currency. It's not. But it's the differential between what Zimbabweans thought they had in the bank and what they actually have in the bank. When that is done, there have been a number of reforms. Most recent was on Monday, where they started allowing the banks to trade foreign exchange amongst themselves. I understand next week they're going to extend those reforms to virtually floating the local currency. When they do that, I think we could see some resumption of some stability in the marketplace.
All right, so we've been talking very much in terms of the valuation of currency. Is it still in short supply? Because that's another one of the concerns that Zimbabweans have been facing.
Yeah, we don't have cash. If you're going to spend the money in your bank account, you have to have a bank card, and you have to use your bank card to swipe. And if you do that, you can do whatever you like. But of course, prices have risen dramatically. I don't know what percentage they've risen by in the last month or so, but it is very dramatic. But the shortage of cash at the banks is a different matter. That's the shortage of bond notes. And the government is not printing currency. Truly, in fact, has not borrowed any money since he was appointed as minister. He's operating on a cash basis now, so there's no fiscal deficit anymore. In addition to that, I think what he plans is to demonetize the bond note around about June and introduce a new currency. And when he does do that, the bank queues will disappear.
All right, so what's also on the horizon, I suspect, might be another economic shock due to the drought. The agricultural sector is probably going to take a hit, as will South Africa and parts of Southern Africa because of this drought.
I've been astounded that so little attention has been paid to the drought situation in Southern Africa. I've been watching the weather very, very closely. Here in Zimbabwe, from the Midlands of Zimbabwe, from about Kadoma south and from Gweru south, the situation is that there has been very little rain. And in fact, cattle are dying. And the crops this year, apart from tobacco likes a dry season like this. And in fact, tobacco, to some extent, this has been a near perfect season for tobacco. Number one, it's all grown in the northern half of the country. Number two, it likes a dry season, providing it's get adequate rain. But as far as maize and soybeans and all the other essential commodities are concerned, and also filling up our dams, Bulawayo today was put on severe rationing, and because their dams are just not, there's been no inflow. In South Africa, I think you guys face a really critical situation, and I think you're going to have to import maize this year. And remember, South Africa is many strengths is the cornerstone of Southern African food security. We've always been able to buy our deficit in South Africa. Today, South Africa itself is actually going to be importing all the basic foods.
All right, so if these shocks are felt across the region, where does that leave Zimbabwe that's already vulnerable?
You can't underestimate our crisis. This is a very deep political, economic, and social crisis here. And living standards here are falling very rapidly. The decision to raise fuel prices from $1.30, $1.40 to $3 plus was an effort to bring fuel prices into reality in relation to the real value of the local currency. And that is done. And fuel coups, they're gone. There's no fuel coups at the moment in Zimbabwe because the damn stuff is so expensive. But I'm concerned about spending power. And I think that is going to affect the economy across the board here, certainly for the remainder of this year. I think our growth rates this year are certainly going to be affected. But the macroeconomic and financial reforms that Mtuli is implementing is going to have a dramatic impact on our productive sector, particularly our export sector, because it's going to increase returns on our exports. And I think this is vital to stabilizing the economy and growing the economy. And I think once we're through this pain, and I imagine 6 months maybe at the most, I think we're going to be in different territory and we're going to see Zimbabwe recovering quite fast. I'm deeply concerned about the weather. But remember, our farming industry is a shadow of what it once was. We import normally 70% of our food. This year, if it becomes 80%, so what? Zambia's had an outstanding season, and Zambia is going to have significant surpluses. And if we are short of food, of soybeans and maize, we'll be able to buy it in Zambia and bring it into Zimbabwe relatively quickly.
All right, Eddie Cross, that's where we'll leave it. Thanks very much indeed for that update. So it looks like there is pain ahead, but it looks as if the finance minister in Zimbabwe might be making the right choices and the right decisions. And 6 months down the line, it could be that Zimbabwe looks very different, but in between, there is this drought that's affecting the region. That's where we're going to leave it for the time being. Coming